I woke up to the angry beep of a heart monitor and the harsh scrape of air forced through a tube. The ceiling above me was a grid of stained tiles, like someone had tried to wash the sky and given up. My mouth was dry, my tongue useless, my hands heavy as wet rope. There was no one in the chair beside my bed. No mother smoothing my hair. No father asking the doctor questions he didn't understand just to sound important. No brother pacing with that rehearsed look of concern. Only an empty room that smelled like bleach and loneliness. My family was busy dividing my inheritance while I lay there learning how to breathe again. My name is Jimena. I'm 33, and I live on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, where winter arrives like a threat and the ocean wind tastes like salt and rust. My home is an old cottage tucked beside a historic boat station my grandfather left me. Docks, land, permits, the whole creaking, barnacled place. Developers have been sniffing around for years, promising the locals revitalization the way a shark promises a fish a new experience. The land and station are valued around $4.5 million, but the trust was written to make sure no one got careless with it. I gained full control at 35, 8 months away. Until then, my older brother Dustin is the trustee, the man with the pen, the man who can say yes or no to repairs that keep me alive. In our family, Dustin has always been the golden boy, investment banker, polished smile, parents' pride. If Dustin walked into a room, my mother's posture changed, like she wanted to be photographed beside his success. My father loved him the way men love trophies, quietly, possessively, certain the win reflected well on them. And me? I was the difficult daughter who loved old boats and cold mornings, and work that left grease under my nails. I didn't fit the picture, so I learned to stand outside the frame. Dustin's wife, Ariel, used to be another part of the picture. Beautiful, quiet, carefully agreeable. She laughed when he laughed. She asked him before she spoke. I assumed she was happy because she looked like she was supposed to be. That assumption almost cost me my life. November on Cape Cod is when the wind starts to bite. My cottage's gas heating system was ancient, always one bad night away from quitting. I'd warned Dustin for 2 years that the boiler needed a real replacement. As trustee, he was obligated to protect the trust property. It wasn't kindness, it was basic duty. He called me with that breezy voice he uses when he wants to sound generous. "Handled," he said. "Top company, full replacement, 40,000. You're welcome." "It's not a gift," I replied. "It's maintenance." A pause, then a soft laugh. "You always make everything a fight, Jimena." 2 days later, a man showed up in a beat-up van with no logo, no uniform, no paperwork. He smelled like cigarettes and cheap coffee. He didn't hand me a card. He didn't even pretend to be official. He walked into my house like he owned my floorboards and started prodding the boiler with the confidence of someone who'd never had to answer for consequences. "Who are you with?" I asked. "Dustin," he said, shrugging. "He paid cash." Cash. The word hit me like cold water. I called my brother. Voicemail. I texted. Nothing. When he finally answered that night, he came in already angry, like he'd been rehearsing. "What is wrong with you?" Dustin snapped. "Do you hear yourself? You sound paranoid." "You said a top company," I said, keeping my voice steady. "This guy isn't licensed. Where did the 40 grand go?" His charm died instantly. "You don't get to interrogate me," he said, and I heard ice clink in the background. He was drinking, relaxing. "You live in that shack because Grandpa pitied you. I'm running the trust because you can't run anything." "It's about safety," I said. "Oh my God." He sighed like I was embarrassing him in public. "Always the martyr, always the drama. If you want to freeze in that cottage, freeze. Maybe then you'll learn gratitude." He hung up. An hour later, my mother called, already crying. "Honey," she said, trembling, "Dustin says you're having another episode." "Another episode?" My laugh came out thin. "Mom, an unlicensed guy just patched my gas boiler. In winter." "You've been stressed," she rushed on. "You get ideas. You attack your brother because you're jealous." Jealous. Their favorite explanation. My father didn't call at all, so I stayed alone in that cold cottage with a system held together by cheap parts and my brother's arrogance. The coldest night came without warning. I woke after midnight with a headache like someone had poured cement behind my eyes. My mouth tasted metallic. My limbs felt wrong. Heavy, slow, distant. The room seemed tilted. Then I caught it. A faint, sweet wrongness in the air, not smoke, not rot, just something invisible and slick. Carbon monoxide. I grabbed my phone. Dustin's number was still first in my favorites, an old habit from a time I believed he'd catch me if I fell. I hit call. It rang. Once, twice. My lungs wouldn't fill properly. I tried to speak, but only a broken whisper came out. My vision narrowed to a tunnel. I remember thinking, absurdly, he's not going to pick up. And then the floor rose to meet me, and the world went dark. ICU is a place where time lies. I floated through hours and days in fragments. Bright lights, gloved hands, my own name spoken like an object. When I finally woke enough to understand, I realized the most painful part wasn't the tube or the weakness. It was the silence. My family didn't come. A nurse mentioned my mother had called, worried, but said visits were restricted for my mental health. As if carbon monoxide poisoning was a mood swing. The first face I saw consistently wasn't my parents'. It was Ariel's. She slipped in during odd hours, eyes red, hair pulled back like she'd run here without looking in a mirror. She sat beside my bed and watched me like she was afraid I'd disappear. When I finally had my voice back, raw, scraped, I asked, "Why are you here?" Ariel swallowed. "Because I heard you." "What?" "That night." She looked down at her hands. "Your call came through on his phone. He'd passed out on the couch with a bottle. I saw your name. I answered." My stomach turned. "And there was this sound," she whispered, "like you were trying to breathe through water, then nothing." Her eyes filled. "I drove to the station. I broke your window. The air inside felt thick. I found you on the floor. I dragged you outside into the snow and called 911. My throat tightened. "Dustin knows?" "He thinks I slept through it," Ariel said, and there was a bitterness in her voice that didn't match her soft face. "He panicked when the police asked questions. He told them you left a burner on. He told your parents you did it to yourself because you were depressed. And they believed him." Ariel nodded once. "Because it's easy." She sat forward, elbows on her knees like she was bracing for impact. "Jimena, his firm is collapsing. He's drowning in debt. He took the 40,000. I stared at her. "For the boiler." "He paid a guy cash and kept the rest," she said. "He said it was temporary. He said he'd fix it after his next deal, but there is no next deal. There's just panic." "So he almost killed me," I said quietly, tasting the words like poison. "For $40,000. Ariel didn't soften it. She didn't excuse it. She just looked at me with exhausted honesty and said, "Yes." A week later, Dustin finally arrived, like a man showing up to audit a problem. Crisp coat, perfect hair, a corporate lawyer at his shoulder, a woman in navy who looked like she billed by the blink. Dustin gave me a bright smile that didn't reach his eyes, then turned to my doctor as if I were furniture. "So," he said, casual, "where do I sign to have her declared incapacitated?" The sentence landed like a slap. Ariel stood near the window, unnaturally still. My doctor, Dr. Patel, didn't blink. She looked at Dustin the way you look at someone who just revealed exactly who they are. "Before we discuss anything," Dr. Patel said, "you should know one detail." Dustin's smile tightened. "Sure. Your wife holds proxy," Dr. Patel said, "medical and financial." 4 words, clean as a blade. Dustin's face drained of color. He spun toward Ariel. "What did you do?" Ariel's voice didn't shake. "We called a notary yesterday. I'm authorized to make decisions if she can't." "That's not possible," Dustin snapped, the charm cracking. She's unstable." Dr. Patel's eyes hardened. "Ms. Alvarez is competent, and your behavior is concerning." Dustin leaned toward me, rage leaking through the smile. "Why are you doing this?" he hissed, low. "After everything I've done for you?" I met his stare. "You mean after you stole the repair money and hired an unlicensed handyman?" For a moment he looked like he might hit me with his words. Then he caught himself, straightened, and smiled again. Because Dustin only knows how to fight when there's an audience. He left with a pleasant, "We'll talk soon," like we were planning brunch. After Dustin left the hospital, he tried to tighten the cage around Ariel. He called her 10 times in 1 hour. When she didn't answer, he showed up outside the ICU elevators like he had every right to haunt the place. I watched from my bed as he cornered her near the vending machines, his hand on her wrist, his smile razor thin. "You're embarrassing me," he said, too softly for the nurses to notice. "You want to play hero? Fine. But remember who pays for your life." Ariel didn't raise her voice. She didn't even pull away. She just looked at him with a kind of calm that frightened him, because calm is what you get right before a storm commits. "I already paid," she said, with 10 years of silence. Dustin's eyes narrowed. "You think she's going to save you? My sister can't even keep a boiler running." Ariel glanced at me through the glass, and for a second I saw the old Ariel, the one trained to apologize, to shrink. Then it vanished. "She doesn't have to save me," she said. "I'm leaving on my own." He tightened his grip, then released it quickly when a nurse walked by. "You step out of line," he murmured, "and I'll make sure you walk away with nothing." Ariel smiled, small and sharp. "Try." That night, my mother finally visited, alone, anxious, clutching her purse like a shield. She hovered at the doorway, eyes flicking from my pale face to the machines, as if looking at consequences made her dizzy. "Dustin says you're confused," she began. I stared at her. "Mom, I was poisoned." She flinched. "He said you left something on. And you believed him." Her lips trembled. "I didn't know what to believe. You get intense." Intense. Another soft word to make my fear sound like a personality flaw. I could have yelled. I could have begged. Instead, I said very quietly, "If I died, would you still call it intensity? Or would you finally call it what it was?" Her eyes filled, but she didn't answer. She kissed the air near my forehead, like she was afraid touching me would make the truth contagious, and she left before I could ask the question that mattered. Why was she here now, when Dustin needed something? The next morning, I signed the proxy papers with a hand that still shook. The notary stamped them with the bored precision of someone who'd never watched a family turn predatory. When the ink dried, something inside me did too. A softness. A willingness to keep believing. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear. Dustin had always counted on my parents to drown out my voice, on my own pride to keep me isolated, on Ariel's silence to keep him safe. He'd built his life on other people's compliance. So when that compliance ended, his world didn't crack. It collapsed. Dustin moved fast after that. Panic makes men efficient. He scheduled a signing meeting with the developers in a glass office that smelled like expensive coffee and cheap confidence. He brought my parents to make it look like family unity, like a proud little tableau, the successful son, the supportive mother, the stoic father. He told Ariel to bring the proxy papers. He assumed she'd obey because she always had. He didn't know she'd been collecting evidence in the quiet hours, copies of invoices, bank statements, cash withdrawal records, the fake elite company estimate with mismatched fonts, photos of the handyman's van, the fire department note about CO levels, things you can't talk your way out of. I showed up anyway, still pale, oxygen tank at my side like an accusation. Ariel supported my elbow. The room went quiet when we entered. Dustin's smile froze. Then it snapped back into place. "Jimena," he said warmly, too warmly, "you should be resting." My mother stood, hand to her mouth. "Honey." My father stayed seated, brows drawn together as if my survival had complicated his schedule. Dustin stepped toward Ariel, soft voice, familiar trick. "Babe, give me the papers. I'll handle this." Ariel walked past him and placed a thick folder on the table so hard it sounded like a verdict. The developer's attorney frowned. "What's that?" Ariel opened it with deliberate care. "The truth," she said. Dustin's eyes flashed. "Ariel, don't." I looked at my parents. My mother's gaze flicked to Dustin for cues. My father's jaw tightened as if he was already preparing to defend him. It hurt, realizing they weren't here for me. They were here for the story. I spoke anyway. Calm, clear. "Dustin didn't try to murder me," I said. "He just stole the money set aside to replace my heating system, because my life was worth less to him than $40,000. My mother made a sound like she'd been punched. "Why would you—" "Because it's true," I cut in, "and you deserve to know who you've been protecting." Ariel slid documents across the table, the real numbers, the fake invoice, the cash withdrawal. The report that spelled out carbon monoxide poisoning in blunt black letters. Dustin laughed too loud. "This is ridiculous," he said. "She's been unstable for years. You know that, Mom. Tell them." My mother's mouth opened automatically. Then her eyes dropped to the paramedic report. Something in her face shifted, slow and awful, like reality forcing its way through denial. My father picked up a page, scanned it, and looked up. "Dustin," he said, voice low. "Explain this." "It's paperwork," Dustin snapped. "People make mistakes." Ariel didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She pulled out statements tied to accounts Dustin had never mentioned. Money moved like a thief moving through dark rooms. "If we sold the station today," Ariel said, looking straight at my parents, "you wouldn't see a cent. He would drain it to cover his debt, all of it." Dustin lunged forward. "Stop." The developer leaned back, suddenly wary, like he'd realized Dustin was the kind of man who bites. Ariel reached into her bag and laid a sealed envelope in front of Dustin. "Divorce papers," she said. Silence. The kind that makes your ears ring. Dustin stared at the envelope like it was alive. "You can't be serious." "I'm serious," Ariel said. "If you fight me, everything in that folder goes to the police. The fraud, the forged estimates, the negligent repair that almost killed your sister." Dustin's eyes cut to me. Pure hatred now, mask gone. "You set me up," he whispered. I didn't blink. "No," I said. "You set yourself up. You just thought no one would watch." My mother sank into her chair, hands shaking. "Dustin," she whispered, voice breaking. "Tell me you didn't—" He couldn't answer. The lie had nowhere left to stand. My father stood abruptly, chair scraping the floor. He looked at Dustin like he was seeing him for the first time and hating the view. "We're leaving," he said to my mother. "Now." "Dad," Dustin started. My father cut him off with one word. "Don't." The developer's attorney cleared his throat, already backing away from the deal. "We're suspending negotiations until this is resolved." Dustin turned on Ariel, voice cracking, panic fully exposed. "You're ruining me." Ariel's expression didn't soften. "You ruined you," she said. The meeting ended in wreckage. Dustin was left in a glass room with his perfect suit and his collapsing future, while everyone walked out around him like he was a problem no one wanted to touch. Investigations aren't dramatic when you're living them. They're phone calls, forms, interviews, the same night replayed until you taste metal again. Dustin sent me voicemails that swung between rage and pleading. He sent my mother to call me with talk of family and forgiveness, as if those words could erase a near-death sentence. I didn't scream. I didn't give them a speech. I just kept distance, because love without accountability is just a leash, and I'd worn mine long enough. 6 months later, spring came to Cape Cod like a slow exhale. The docks dried in the sun. The air smelled like wet wood and possibility. Ariel and I sat on the pier with coffee, planning the restoration the right way, licensed work, inspections, receipts that didn't lie. She was my partner now, not because she owed me, but because she'd chosen to stop being afraid. My phone buzzed. Another call from my mother. I watched it ring out and set it face down. Ariel lifted her cup in a small salute. "To breathing," she said. "To breathing," I echoed. Family, I learned, isn't the people who share your DNA and defend the golden boy because it keeps the picture pretty. Family is the person who breaks a window in the middle of the night, drags you into the snow, and chooses your life over their fear. Blood can be an origin. It's not a contract. And it's never an excuse.